Hi there. I'm Smita Murthy, Managing Partner at Open Cliff Partners. We're a product advisory and consulting firm. We provide product advisory and enable value creation throughout the product lifecycle for technology and tech enabled businesses. We partner with investors and boards, founders and CEOs, product leaders and individuals, meeting them where they're at in the value creation process. This podcast series focuses on cross functional perspectives on what it takes to build successful products across domains and industries. I interview leaders from various functions with whom I've worked with to build and launch great products and the lessons we learned along the way. Today, I'm beyond thrilled to host Sridhar Jayanthi. Hi, Sridhar.
Hi, Smita. Very nice to see you again.
Yeah. So let me introduce Sridhar. Sridhar is a mechanical engineer by background and has transitioned over the years to a software professional with over 30 years in software products, including 22 years in cybersecurity. So very, very deep domain expertise. Sridhar has played multiple roles in his career, ranging from software developer to CTO, vice president to an entrepreneur and CEO, and worked on CAD, SCADA, cybersecurity, and venture capital markets. Sridhar has enormous global distributed product development experience, having started or managed teams in US, India, Ireland, UK, Germany, Netherlands, and China, including McAfee's, now Trellix's, largest organization globally. And that's where Sridhar and I met, and I'm certainly going to talk about that as we go along. So welcome, Sridhar. Really happy to have you here. Why don't we kick off by why don't you tell our audience a fun fact about yourself?
First of all, Smita, thank you for having me. It's very good to be in touch with you again. A fun fact about me, something that's not related to work, I'm assuming. It's more.
Yeah, sure.
I would say my love of sports and not just watching sports, but I like playing sports. I pretty much play anything with a racket, and I'm usually good at them: tennis, badminton, racquetball, all of these games.
Mhm.
But what people don't know is I have even tried a couple of seasons at rugby. Uh,
Ooh,
when I was, it was probably just a couple of years after college. And last year, I even joined a 45 plus league of baseball. So I've been
interesting.
playing baseball in a league. In fact, last year my league won.
Oh,
So
that's fantastic.
that's something new nobody probably knows about.
Yeah, and I know you are an avid cricket fan, and I know your son is an avid cricket player,
That's right.
right? So all the sports, like all over the world. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
we're all a bunch of sports lovers.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Nowadays it's all NFL, NFL.
Have you tried pickleball? That's the craze that's going around the country these days.
I have just started playing pickleball with some friends.
Okay.
I still find it, maybe I'll wait another 5 years before I fully adopt it because I still like tennis.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, pickleball, I say more power to people that play it. I've seen more people tweak their knees and hurt themselves than I care
Really?
to. Yeah, so it's something that I've thought about, but I've stayed away from so far.
Yeah. It's a fun game. I hope to take it up sometime.
Yeah, no, of course. And it's fantastic that you love so many different sports and there's plenty of opportunities where you live for you to be
Yep,
indulging in all of that. So that's fantastic.
that's right.
So Sridhar, very excited to have you here. And like you said, we go back a ways. When I had actually moved to India after living in the United States for a long time, and I joined McAfee in India. Sridhar ran McAfee in India, and he had built this amazing team, and it continued to grow while we were there together. And of course, you were there much longer. So why don't we start by telling our audience more about your role and your function when we met and when we worked together?
Sure. Uh, One of the most fortunate things that happened to me was when we were looking to move back from Boston to India, I ran into this job at McAfee. They were trying to set up an operation in India. And luckily, I got selected to lead that. And I moved, literally relocated with my entire family to Bangalore in India. And we were supposed to grow to 100 or 150 people, maybe 200 if we did really well. And that was the goal. And McAfee was struggling. They needed to build more product. And it turned out that, they couldn't really build much more if they just had all their employees in California or even, in Oregon. So that's when the India idea came up. So I had to really make it successful for McAfee's prospects as a company to grow. And So fast forward, about a couple of years after I started, literally I had to start it from scratch.
Yep.
In all of my first 2 years of interviews, I really ran into maybe 2 or 3 people with security experience or background. So everybody we hired, we had to train them and get them up and about on cybersecurity. And very proud to say, first of all, that today, Bangalore, or maybe I would say more like India, is probably has the largest cybersecurity talent in the world, even compared to Silicon Valley or any other place. And I'm very proud to have been part of triggering that. Yeah,
Absolutely. And absolutely. That's definitely a wonderful feather in your cap.
yeah.
And, I had a small part that I played when I was there for about 3 years. I would say, a couple of things. One, I think that kudos to you for building such a wonderful organization there. But I think when I reflect back to the time I spent at McAfee,
Mhm.
both in India and then working with my colleagues across the world. And as you know, we all ended up traveling a fair bit to kind of keep in close contact with all of our colleagues everywhere. The thing that stands out to me is, that very intentional leadership and
Mhm.
intentional culture building that
Yep.
stands out to a point where I think it's one of the best career experiences I've had in my career. Not only in India, but also when I think about my entire career, and a place where you not only are working and building products and having fun, but you also make friends
Mhm.
that kind of last beyond the time when your colleagues. So I know you had a huge part to do with that. So tell me about that journey as you were building the team in India and how you kept the culture alive to build great products.
Sure. So first of all, around the time you came into the company, we had to go through a lot of trust building with our headquarters and making sure that India was being seen as a positive force and was helping in the strategic goals that we had. And we got to a stage where we were going from just being extensions of teams in the US to completely owning products in India. And that was about 3 to 4 years into existence of the McAfee Indian operation.
Yeah.
And and around that time, we started saying, now is probably a good time to hire product managers in India. And that's when you notice that we had about a half a dozen product
Yeah.
managers at peak, and it was because it was working really well, and almost all of them had some kind of experience being product managers in the US, just like you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that was the key to start with. Of course, later on we had many product managers who got trained by all of these folks, just like you, people like you who trained other PMs.
Yeah.
And we have now a product management culture in India that did not exist when we moved there. And the culture was a very important aspect of it, because um, we had to build trust, and the culture was all about integrity. When people sit in a conference call and say they're working on something, or they are making progress, or they ran into obstacles, you need people on the other side to believe what you're saying, first of all. And a lot of people had very bad experience, with working with offshore teams, not being able to trust what they're hearing.
Yep.
And so the culture becomes a very important part, where everybody had to really focus on being accurate, being precise in their conversation, and being clear in their communication. Yeah, and it's very common for people to say distant and remote teams need to have good communication, but making that a reality at the scale at which we have built out McAfee India was a real challenge. I would say I spent most time on the communication side. I literally was sitting on both sides of conference calls. I traveled to the US to hear how it sounds on the other side. And, it was painstaking, effort to understand how to build this out. And turned out that, it got to a stage where people were beginning to be friends. We had a lot of people traveling back and forth, and that built a lot of trust, and that allowed us to really engage and really become, probably, in my opinion, probably one of the best offshore organizations any company has ever built.
I couldn't agree more. And just to um, compare and contrast, this was so when I joined McAfee, that was my second stint in India. I had previously come on a 2-year expat gig to Hyderabad for another product company,
Mhm.
and that was a time when this was in 2004, 2004 to 6. That was the time
Okay.
I came, where the culture was exactly not the culture of the company, but the mindset was exactly what you were describing, that you had to change, where it was more, well, okay, I am being forced to leverage this global office,
Mhm.
offshore office, because I can get X number of engineers at the price of one US based engineer. So it was really more a cost arbitrage decision than a talent decision.
Mhm.
And therefore, and plus there were communication issues, there were trust issues, there were all those things, where it was almost like work was thrown over the fence,
Mhm.
and a lot of finger pointing happened. And part of my 2 year, I think I spent most of the time actually, like, sorting that out and arbitrating those discussions, which was not a fun thing to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But compare and contrast with a few years later, which was 2009 is when I joined McAfee. So
Mhm.
2009 to 12 or 13, when I was there, um, it was no long that discussion no longer was a thing. We had trusted people, mature engineering leaders, mature product managers. In fact, I had one other person from that era when we had product managers. We were just hiring product managers, Sridhar, who said, like, when I was looking at building that talent in India, we started hiring from the B schools in India. So some of those things, like doing it for the first time and being successful in that model, is very, very rewarding. And nobody ever talked about offshore. In fact, like all the products that I owned, we were building 100% out of India for customers to use all over the world,
Hmm.
right? It was no longer, hey, listen, a shadow product group, none of that.
Yeah, yeah. This
So it
was
was amazing.
we were directly exposed to customers worldwide, and
Correct.
yeah, and one of the things, if there is value that people can derive out of our conversation, I want to make it clear that a lot of companies now or in the future will be setting up offshore operations. It is not as simple as hiring software engineers and then sending work to them.
Yeah, no.
It's got to be much more invested. There's got to be much more invested in that to make it work, and it's going to require somebody who's dedicated to make it work for a while before it's on autopilot.
Yeah.
So that, I think, simply said, it's not exactly easy to do, but if the savings is going to allow your company to succeed better and it's worth it for you, then you got to invest that time and effort to make it happen.
Yeah. Now,
But
this
if it doesn't, I say this to everybody: look, if money is not a problem for your company and you're ready to spend as much money as needed, then everybody who's developing a product should be in one building, you should never have an offshore anything in any distance. Even the next building cuts down communication so much. So it's important only if the economic model requires you to do an offshore center.
Yeah, yeah, no, completely agree. And I think before we leave this topic, which I know is a passion topic for you,
Yeah.
and also something that I deeply care about, because pretty much as a product manager, I worked with India teams my whole career, and it's and obviously as someone from India, I want to see both sides succeed in what's going on. I think the one topic I want to touch upon is we got to a point where I would bring my engineering counterparts and my engineering partners with me to customer visits in the US, wherever the customers were. In fact, like I remember the one bringing my engineering partner to the US, but we've traveled everywhere, wherever the customer was, Japan,
Hmm.
Israel, wherever our customers were, with our partners. And I think for me, the change from my earlier stint in India to the McAfee stint, the difference was the voice of the customer, what the market needs, and how the work we're doing
Hmm.
makes a difference for the quote unquote mothership
Hmm.
was like the game changer,
Yep.
right? Because if you're just told, hey, do this, and we don't know how, like everyone wants to know that the work we're doing makes a difference,
Yep.
right? And I think the more you can bring in the market perspective, the customer perspective, and keep the teams engaged on that and grounded on that, I think the more success that you have in this.
Absolutely. I think your point is so valid. Um, you know, Most of the people, when you offshore some product development, very often it goes to a geography where they do not have the same experience as you do
Yeah.
with these products.
Yep.
So they're really building a product based on imagination of what use it is for the
Yes.
customer rather than real experience. So people, putting engineers and product managers in front of customers all the time makes all the difference in how good the product is going to be,
Yeah.
and just the level of satisfaction and engagement of the teams because they understand what they're building makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm not going to go into rabbit hole. I actually wanted to talk about design too, because
Yeah.
I've since then worked in these models where one of the companies I worked for was very keen on being very India first, which is fantastic. Not like an afterthought, but being India first, which is a great objective, and we were very successful in that. But
Mhm.
there are some functions, especially for if you're serving the US based market, that need to be somewhat, you need to be thoughtful about where you place your teams,
Mhm.
right? um, Everybody being, if you're building products for a certain market, there needs to be a footprint in that market, so you have access to that customer and their needs. And we were actually going the other extreme, where we said we can do all product management, all UX from India, with customer exposure virtually, with a very small footprint in the US, and that was challenging. We succeeded up to a certain point, but beyond that point, we struggled a little bit, because the nature of product discovery is very iterative,
Right.
and that requires a little bit. It's easiest when you're in the same building, it's easiest if you're in the same time zone. But what we found, where we landed, was we kept we kept the leadership and some of the team here, and we had a lot more team members in India, and for both UX and for product. And we had a ton of communication that had to happen to make sure it works and it scales.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's at least my latest experience in this model that I wanted to talk about. Okay, so I don't want to spend the whole time on this. I know, because you're a cybersecurity guru, you've spent a ton of time in engineering as a CTO, as an entrepreneur. So tell me about a B2B enterprise SaaS product you've built that you're especially fond of, and why.
Well, it would have to be the one where it was my own startup, right? I co-founded Polylogics with Atul Kabra, who you might be familiar with,
Yeah, yeah, of course.
ex McAfee, ex FireEye. So this was right after I left FireEye. I had joined FireEye to really start up the endpoint group there, because previously it was just purely a network security company.
Yeah.
And started the endpoint group. We acquired Mandiant, and I
Mm-hmm.
inherited all of the Mandiant products and the teams. And we built out a pretty successful business. We went from a small single digit revenue to like $65 million over the next 3 years, with what became very clearly the EDR market now. But back then, EDR was really barely being used. What we did realize was there were a lot of companies that were using products that um, that was previously built by the same by Mandiant or FireEye. And when we came up with the new version, it would cost them $1 million to replace it or more.
Mm-hmm.
So we started a product, a SaaS product in Polylogics, which was focused on becoming like the iOS of the endpoint. We wanted to build something that have multiple vendor applications running on a single endpoint agent. So it just plug in. So we literally wanted to have the ability to add apps and remove apps like you would on your iPhone,
Yeah.
right? And that's what we tried to do. And that is, we built out an EDR on that. We built out a couple of products on top of that platform, and that's my baby, and I love that product. But a more memorable one for me is one of the first SaaS products in the market. I built out with a startup in Boston back in '96. We built something called InfraDesk, which was
Uh-huh.
a customer support, online customer support management tool. And it was brilliant. It was a great UI. It was a great workflow. And we were so proud, and we were amazed that you could do this in a SaaS model. It was
Yeah.
one of the first SaaS products out there in the market. So I
Yeah.
would say those are the top of my mind SaaS products for me.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, no, that's great. So how did you, what were some key metrics you tracked for these products to determine that they were successful?
Well, both of these SaaS products were in startups.
Mhm.
So obviously, the number one metric is, you know, how much are we selling this,
Yeah,
and what's
revenue.
our
Yeah.
sales revenue, number of customers, number of big logos. You're always looking at all of these, and you want to get to a certain number of ARR, and retention and renewal, all of that.
Mhm.
I would say those would be the most important ones. But also, we had some level of tracking what customers were using. So we were looking at, how much of our product is really being used, how much of it is just, we think it's a great idea, but not the customer.
Nobody is using it. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's an important area to track as well. And it's not any one metric. The obvious metrics are the revenue and all of that,
Yeah.
but the real metric that we should worry about is, how useful is your product for your customers, and what is their satisfaction, customer satisfaction with the product.
Yeah, yeah, no, very, very, very true and very important. Because if you think about why are we building the product, it's to solve a business problem a customer has. And if
Yeah,
we solve the problem well, they're willing to pay money to to have
yeah,
that problem solved,
yeah.
right? And if it's not doing that, and if you are able to see exactly what they're using, so great to hear about the instrumentation you had in those products to see utilization. um,
Mhm,
so that's very cool. Actually, a lot of the products these days are moving to more of a utilization based model, so
mhm.
metering for pricing, right?
That's right.
Which I think is really a great evolution in how we price our products,
That's
right?
right.
We thought we were super cool when it was SaaS and it was a subscription model, which is still very relevant. But
Mhm.
I think to a metering and usage based model is even superior. That shows a higher degree of confidence in the product solving a customer problem.
Yeah, you got to be careful though, because it leaves the customer open to budget overruns, and
Mhm.
so I mean, you can do that in the initial stages of a technology. Like right now in AI, it's all about, number of API calls and so on, and tokens. But nobody wants to really have a business that's so open ended in terms of cost.
Yeah,
So over time, it has to really be more predictable than that. Same thing happened with the SIM, and people were charging for the
yeah,
number of days you store your data,
right.
amount of data you can store, and all of that. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I think you have to get to a predictable model.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. It's interesting to watch this space evolve, not only in terms of how we deliver technology, but how we charge for it.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
analysts are tracking it too, especially in the days of, like you alluded to, in the time of AI, because everyone's still trying to figure out how best to price this.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So tell me, so I want to actually pivot. I know we've already talked about, you influencing the direction of a product because you founded a company and like that's your baby. I think I want to pivot to a special topic I reserve for some of my guests.
Hmm.
And I consider you an ally for women in tech and women in leadership. So I really want to get your thoughts on, either at McAfee or otherwise, what are some things that you've done to
Hmm.
ensure that, there's good representation across the board, be
Hmm.
it in terms of your engineering workforce, product workforce, or across the board, because this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart
Hmm.
as a woman in tech, a woman in product, and woman in leadership. And I am of the opinion that sometimes there's lip service being given without true commitment.
Mhm.
Even though there's plenty of research to show a diverse group shows measurable, uh, improvements in business.
Right.
So I want to pick your brain on that, Sridhar. Tell me about what things you've done, things you've seen that work
Mhm.
in your experience.
I, in terms of women, I'm assuming you're talking about
Yeah, sure.
women in tech.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, there are a few things that I could pull off when we were at McAfee and at FireEye, and that was, first of all, you got to make sure that you have a very friendly culture that allows everybody to feel empowered in the organization. You don't want, domination by certain people, whether it's a manager or other team members who could be intimidating, who may come in with a more chauvinistic approach to women in tech. So that is an important part of the culture. And when you see things that are not going right, you got to nip it in the bud. I believe that kind of a culture really comes from the top. You cannot build that from ground up. That has to come from the top. But there were more tangible things that we did while we were at McAfee. We had special rooms for, what we today call as lactation rooms for, new mothers, and we had a lot more flexibility and a kind approach to women who had various challenges, especially when I was in India, because women play, almost a dual role in their lives in India. When they go to work, they're trying to be equal to others. When they go home, quite often they are expected to, serve the family in multiple ways. And so we built a culture to be very flexible. Sometimes they can't come in, they need to go home early, or various things like that. So those were the tangible things that we could do. What I would do if I was building an organization, and I thought about this even at McAfee, but I really couldn't pull it off, which is to really allow um, a mother's working hours. So that's, pick 4 hours any day, and you come in for those 4 hours.
Mhm.
Every day, and whatever time works for you, because everybody has different challenges at home, and that's one way of somebody working part time still be doing the important job that they're doing, but completely at their flexibility.
That
I,
is fantastic. That is
yeah.
fantastic. I hope people are noting what you said. So I want to also talk about a topic that is very relevant. We already brought it up, the AI, Gen AI, and agentic AI.
Mhm.
Um, tell me, tell me in your view how all of these are changing how we build products. Tell me where
Sure.
you're seeing it being applied.
I think in the next year or two, um, almost 100% of all software development teams will be impacted by AI. If they are not already impacted, in my opinion, many are already assisted by AI today. I mean, take along the entire life cycle. You start with training the model onwards to, developing, and people use various AI models to help them with coding. And
Mm,
you know, every week I hear a new model can do better than all the other models in coding. And I think we are only a few months away from models being better than all humans in terms of coding. I think right now we are at 70% or something like that. Better than 70% of the developers. That's
mhm.
still not great. They
No.
got to get to like 90+% before I would say you can have a lot more code being developed by AI than by humans. But nevertheless, people who are good at coding are still not sitting there coding things that can be generated by AI, and then you appropriately modify it, fix it, make it, optimize it, based on your expertise. It just saves you a lot of time, and then just keep going down that path, all the way to testing. um, the testing part is one of the best areas for AI to help in
Yeah.
terms of just making sure there is broad coverage for every build, every release that happens, and even allowing some test development to happen by AI as well. And then down to deployment and essentially the applications, once they start running, you have the kind of tooling in the code that allows you to really judge what parts of the product are being used most, even better than any other time. We had to put in a lot of hooks to really understand the
Yeah.
metrics in the past, but that will become the norm, I believe, in the future. So there are products, development tools, all the way to the um, you know tools that will allow you to provide security for AI data, all the way to application security and so on. And it's going to impact everybody. And having that kind of a guidance by AI is how it's going to affect everybody.
Yeah. And I think it's a positive thing because it frees up people to
Mhm.
focus on the more strategic aspects of, in this case, product building,
Correct.
versus like the more mundane, routine, automatable tasks of the yesteryears, right?
Yep.
So I think it's a positive change. We're living in a very interesting phase, where it's not the age of the robots where it's taking over the world, but it's it's certainly an age where we have advanced so much that we can have some of the routine things being done
Yep.
better and faster than humans can do.
Absolutely. And if I were to add, beyond just how it affects individual software engineers, and software engineers as a collective is going to be impacted in a different way. I have my son has a startup in and uses AI for cybersecurity,
Yeah.
and he tells me that he is doing the same work that an entire team would do typically, and in less time
Yep.
already today.
Yep. Yep.
And so this means that when product managers ask engineers how long will something take, they need to look at this differently. They need to see in terms of days and at most weeks for new versions to be released, and no longer months and a year. There should
Yeah.
be nothing that takes a year. So
Yeah.
that's actually one thing that I would say is the massive macro level change in software engineering that's coming, which means that where you needed 10 people, you only need like maybe 2 or 3,
Yeah.
and you can do the same product release instead of in a year, in maybe 3 months.
Yeah. And,
No
and
problem.
this is good. This is good for all of us because
It's
you
good for
can,
all of us. Yeah.
yeah, it's good for all of us.
I see this as a very positive change. It's not about people will lose jobs, but people will be able to build more product, more sophisticated products, more better quality products, more secure as we move forward, and that's only good for customers.
Yeah, that's fantastic perspective. And it's changing the product management world too. It's changing it in terms of there's a lot of known use cases and test cases, acceptance criteria that in the world of agile and scrum that product owners wrote repeatedly. You don't
Hmm.
need to do that anymore. There
That's
are
right.
tools that just like automate all of that,
Yep.
right? So you really, when I started as a product manager way back when, we had to say, oh, are you an inbound or an outbound? Are you strategic? Are you tactical? Well,
Yeah.
guess what? If we get enough faith in how all of these are getting automated, everyone's going to be a strategic outbound product manager. And
That's right.
that's really every product manager's aspiration, right? So I
That's
think this is a positive thing for people who know how to use it. Make sure there's trust, make sure there is a high degree of um, correctness and accuracy in what is being produced, and then you can focus on more fun things to do, like
that's
talking
right.
to customers.
Yeah, that's right.
So, okay, Sridhar, so we're almost at the end of this conversation. I know you're a big, avid book reader. I still have the Good to Great book that you wrote in
Oh,
front of and gave to me, constantly aspiring to be a level 5 leader.
mhm.
So I know you're a avid reader. So do you have any book recommendations for our audience?
So I have been studying a lot of AI right now, given all the changes that are coming. So I've been spending a lot more time on AI, and there are not that many books yet written about it for you to go and read. So I spend a lot of time on blogs and YouTube has been an amazing source of information. There are some particular I would say experts that I follow, and I mean, literally, I would catch up on something today, and 2 days later, the same person is coming back and saying, "This is mind blowing," and I thought he just said that 2 days ago. And so I would say, people should be really spending time learning about the developments in AI. It is impossible to catch it in any book. You got to catch it on blogs and YouTube videos and so on. There are books. There was a book that I was reading, and I'm not done with it. There's one I really liked was called Empowered:
Mm,
Ordinary People and Extraordinary Products.
yeah.
And I'm in the early days, but two two product managers wrote that.
Yep.
One of them from Symantec, who had a lot of experience in cybersecurity. So I'm reading that, but my overwhelming time is taken over by AI these days.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Fantastic. That was very insightful. I am beyond thrilled that we had this conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Sridhar. Really appreciate it. I hope the audience finds this masterclass in leadership and culture building above. Of course, we built great products, but that, I hope this was a great takeaway from this conversation. Really appreciate your time, Sridhar. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.